Food and warmth are pretty basic human needs. And none of us really want to live in a situation where we have to choose between those two things, food and warmth. But right now, tonight, within a 1 mile radius of where I'm standing here in Aberdeen and across the developed nations, there are people who have to make that choice. I know there are people within a 1 mile radius of where I'm standing who are choosing to feed their children or heat their home because they can't afford to do both. We live in difficult times, times of austerity, times when money is tight. There's not a lot of money in the system. Public spending is severely limited. And the reality is people are having to choose between those two things, feeding their children and heating their homes. In light of that, we need to think of a different way of doing things. We need to change the way that we move money around the system. When there's not much money in the system, we need to make it work harder. We need to increase the velocity of that money. And one of the ways of doing that is through something called social impact investment. And YMCA in Scotland here have created a version of social impact investment which we've called the Social Impact Investment Partnership, which brings together the public, the private, and the social sector or charity sector together in a unique partnership and relationship to make money more effective, to increase the velocity of the money within the system. The easiest way I find to think of how a social impact investment partnership works is I think of it as 3 points of a triangle. So there are 3 parties involved in the social impact investment partnership. And as I explain this, I'll use the example of a project which YMCA delivered over a 3-year period using an earlier version of this model which we have now molded into the social impact investment partnership. So the first party involved, the first partner is the delivery partner. That's an organisation who designs and delivers a service in the community to address a particular social need, maybe youth unemployment. The delivery partner would normally be someone in the social sector, so a charity, a voluntary organisation like YMCA. And the delivery partner in the example that I'm going to use, in fact, was YMCA. This is a project that we delivered for unemployed young people. And the second partner in the Social Impact Investment Partnership is the investment partner, or partners, because it's usually plural. And the investment partners provide the money to pay for that service, to provide the service, in this case, to work with unemployed young people and support them to move on into a positive destination, into employment or further education or training. The investment partners provide that working capital. They provide the means whereby to pay for the service. The investment partners can either be institutions like banks, insurance funds, pension funds, big investment houses, or it can be charitable organisations, charitable trusts, philanthropic organisations, or it can be private individuals, you and me. In fact, in the project which we ran over the last 3 years, there were 13 investors. 12 of them lived in the area where the project was being delivered, and they invested between 5,000 and 50,000 sterling. So it wasn't huge investments. These were manageable investments that ordinary individuals could make. So the third partner in the Social Impact Investment Partnership is the outcome partner. Normally, that would be a part of government, some department within government. And in fact, in the case of the example I'm using, it was the Department of Work and Pensions, part of the UK's government based in Westminster. So the outcome partner and the delivery partner agree in advance a set of desired outcomes. In the case of the one that we were running, the outcome was that we would work with at least 100 unemployed young people per year, and at least 60 of those would achieve a positive destination. They would go on into employment, further education or training. So those outcomes are agreed between the outcome partner and the delivery partner at the outset. Now, if those outcomes are achieved, then the outcome partner repays the investment partner their original working capital, their original investment, plus interest at an agreed rate. And that essentially is how a social impact investment partnership works between those 3 parties. It's a different way of moving money around the system. And one of the important strengths of this is, from the outcome partner's point of view, they are paying for outcomes that they know have definitely been achieved after they've been achieved. So they know they've achieved that outcome and they pay for it after the outcome has been achieved. There are a number of important things about that, but not the least of which is governments are historically very reluctant to pay for prevention. Because if government invests its money on something to prevent, to prevent crime, and they spend the money and it doesn't work, the money's spent, it's gone, and they still have to address the issue. So they're reluctant to spend money twice. So they tend not to want to spend money on prevention, especially at a time like this when money is very tight, budgets are very tight. Budgetary pressure will almost always push spending towards acute services and away from prevention. The reality is prevention is better than cure. I think everybody knows that at a very common sense sort of level. So if government can know that the money they spend is going to work, then they're much more inclined to spend it on prevention. So if you can stop people from committing crime, then it's cheaper than spending lots of money putting them in prison and keeping them there afterwards. So this allows outcome partners, government departments, to spend money on prevention, on preventing things from happening, preventative services. The other great thing about the Social Impact Investment Partnership is that it works if and only if everyone involved is prepared to think and act a little bit differently than they normally would. And it puts the emphasis for everyone onto the outcomes, because that's the basis of payment. It's outcomes. And it's outcomes that have definitely been achieved. So what the outcome partner has effectively done is move the risk of it not working down to the investment partners. And if you focus on outcomes, then your mindset begins to change how you do things, because you then look at what is this service trying to achieve. In the case of this example, to support unemployed young people to move into further education or employment or training. And that's the focus of the whole process, the whole system. And instead of focusing on structures, we focus on people, because the people that we want to see them move on into employment, training, further education. Let me give you an example of that. There was a young man in the particular project that we were running, and he was referred to the project, but he didn't show up. He was told, you can go to this project. You turn up on Monday at a given time. He didn't turn up. So because the outcome was for that young person, he was the focus. We didn't just say, well, he hasn't shown up, we'll get someone else. One of our staff went round to his home, and he opened this bedroom door, which is where he lived. He really didn't leave his bedroom much. He opened his bedroom door a fraction and had a conversation with the youth worker through that small open door. The next time the youth worker went back, he opened the door a little bit further. And on the third visit, he opened the door further and invited the youth worker in. And eventually, this young man joined into the program. He began to engage. He began to benefit from the program. And in fact, he went on to become a navigator in the Merchant Navy. And the last time I was chatting to him, he was about to leave on an exploration trip, a scientific exploration trip to the Antarctica, and he was the navigator for the ship going down to Antarctica. He's a remarkable young man. He did remarkable things. And the funny thing is, that's what he always wanted to be, was a navigator. So he was able to fulfill that ambition. But part of that was because the way we were structuring this, all the stuff that was going on in the background of moving the money around, allowed us to focus on the outcome, not on the systems, not on the structures, but on the people, on that young man's life. And that changed his life. And we're so convinced that that structure works, that what we've done is we've created a series of template legal documents so that anyone can use this structure to make something happen in their own community. So these documents, these template legal documents are there. They're an off-the-shelf resource. You can simply add your own budget and your own outcomes, and you can make something happen in your community using a social impact investment partnership as the structure. And that, I think, is a powerful thing in itself, but not only that, you can invest in it. Because this works at a level where you and I can invest. I said earlier there were 13 investors in the original one that we ran, and 12 of them lived in the local community. They invested between 5,000 and 50,000 sterling. That means that local people can gather in the local community and be a force for change. And we should never underestimate the power of that, local people recreating community. I would argue, in fact, that's a significant part of public service reform, is recreating community and a sense of community, social capital and community capacity. In the project we ran, 12 of these investors lived in the local community, and they invested not only their money, but their time and their energy. They got to know the young people. They went for coffee with them. They came in and did simulated job interviews with them. They engaged with the young people, and they were themselves changed by that. They encouraged their friends to invest in similar projects and similar ways of changing the community. So that power of people coming together in the community to be a force for change and a force for good. The potential of social impact investment is enormous. The UK government, Westminster government, have said that they anticipate the social impact investment market to be £1 billion by 2020. If you took that £1 billion in terms of the project I was mentioning earlier for unemployed young people, you could support over 300,000 unemployed young people. That's half of all the young people unemployed in the UK. With that £1 billion through social impact investment, we could support every unemployed young person in Scotland for 8 years. There is huge potential in this way of addressing the needs of our communities, to move money around the system, to increase the velocity of the money, to make a real difference to real people in real communities. And that's just taking the model as we've currently conceived it, but imagine if we pushed it on one step further. And we kept everything exactly the same. The whole structure, all the legal relationships, all the contracts, all of that remains exactly the same. The system, the provision of working capital by the investors, the outcomes, all of that, the return of the working capital with interest, all of that stays the same, but imagine the outcome partner wasn't partner government. Imagine the outcome partner was a commercial organisation, maybe a supermarket chain. And the outcome then becomes to reduce shoplifting. And that becomes a commercial decision on the part of the supermarket company. Or it could be an insurance company, and the outcome is to reduce the number of road traffic accidents involving people under the age of 21. You then begin to add new dimensions and new money, new capital into the system. And that begins to change the whole dynamic of how our society addresses these needs in our communities. Social impact investment partnerships can change the way that we do that kind of service to our community. You can take the template legal documents, you can create them in your own community, you can invest in them individually. And if we do that, then people won't have to make a choice between food and warmth in their homes. Thank you very much for listening.